inspiring ideas that propel the business community forward. And now, Connect with KB.
This is Kristin Beltzer, and this is an episode of Connect with KB. My guest today is a young professional who, like everyone else, is trying to navigate the pandemic the best way possible. Joining me is Molly Duda. Molly, it is so great to have you in Studio B. We've been trying to do this for a while, so I'm so glad that you're here.
We have. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. Well, let's do this. Let's start the podcast just like I do with all of my guests, and I want to hear your story. Tell me the Molly Duda story.
Yeah. So I was born and raised, grew up in Hazlet. Went to Michigan State post-college, moved to Chicago, where I have been living for the last about 3.5 years now. So things have changed a little bit, as you know, with the pandemic. But still working in tech and in software. So
let's talk a little bit, though, too, about your journey kind of through Hazlet. You were an athlete, and you played basketball, and what else?
Volleyball, and I ran track as well.
And then you went to Michigan State, and you ran track there for a couple of years too. So
I did.
Lots of Duda connection with Michigan State athletics.
Yeah.
As you kind of talk a little bit about living in Chicago and the journey now in terms of your career. I know that you work as an account executive. What does your company do, and what is the role that you've been playing? And then we're going to talk a little bit about how that's changed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually made a change last October. So early fall, I switched companies, still working in the software as a service space. And essentially what I do is assist the small business sector. So I moved sort of from a direct selling role at my last company to more of a consultative position, where folks who are looking to change their payment processor initially will come to us, and then we'll add on additional products in that sector. So mostly related to payments, but we're in the overall software landscape.
Have you learned a lot being in the business?
I have learned way more than I thought I ever would have. I was a little nervous actually switching companies because I had never worked in the fintech space prior to this role I have now. But I don't know. I don't think that a lot of the training needed to be done outside of the job. I've learned so much in the role itself.
Do you, and I know you pretty well, we have known each other for a long time now, and you have a tendency to get a little restless. And I know you. And so do you think it's you and your personality, or do you think it's more of your age now? And, that group of people between 20 and 30 really kind of think about their lives and their careers and, trying new things all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely my personality and something I'm working on. But no, I think that it's interesting how many people do look to pivot and change roles once things are not clicking for them. And in some aspects, I think it is somewhat of a problem. When people get a little bored or a little antsy waiting for a promotion, they're ready to jump ship right away instead of just sticking it out maybe 6 to 8 more months. And that's something I talk to new hires at my current company a lot about, is like your onboarding period and ramp time at this particular company could be as long as 18 to 24 months. And at that point, a lot of people are getting restless. Like, I've been doing this role for so long, I need to move on, when really you're just kind of getting in the swing of things at that 2-year mark.
Well, I think sometimes, from my perspective and how I came through the system is, people would say that you need to be in a job and you need to stay there. And, really, I look at it now, and I would say that probably the biggest thing that I would change is that I didn't make moves soon enough. I wish I would have done more of that. And so there's a part of it that I really admire that you do this. But do you think that those two worlds kind of come together at some point in time where you get a little restless, but then you get a little more settled in too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, once you can start to match kind of your value set and really pinpoint, like, this company is moving this needle for me, I think it's important to stay here for that purpose. I think you're more apt to stay somewhere that's fulfilling your value sets instead of just being like, you know what, this one thing isn't happening. I need a promotion right now. I'm out of here.
Well, and I think that that's what young people want. They want to be valued, and they want this opportunity to grow too. And so I think if a company can put a plan together for you and you can see it and you know where you're going, it's helpful, and not just this day-to-day that it's all the same and you just don't have any idea what's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about how you view the work that you're doing, the workplace, and the changing work environment. Clearly, since the global pandemic kind of came on the scene in March, how did your work environment change, and what are you doing now?
Yeah. So early March, I would say the first week or so, my company's headquartered out of San Francisco, but I'm in the Chicago office, and there's only about 40 of us in the Chicago location. So that first week of March, we went to an optional work from home as we were getting more information, and a lot of people kept coming into the office. And March 9th, they announced, we're done. Everyone's work from home. Please stay home. And that pivot was a little bit scary because not only did we not know, what's going on in the world, but also like, how is our business actually doing and how are we doing as a company? So we got answers pretty quickly within the first 2 weeks that like, we're fine. We're actually seeing some spikes in activity because we are an online payments processor. So a lot of in-store purchasing and brick and mortar shops were looking to use us to pivot to go fully online. So throughout March, it was a little bit strange, I would say, sort of a waiting game to hear like next steps. And at that time in March, we were just talking about this. It's so funny. We were like, oh, we'll be back by May 1st. Mm-hmm. Things will be fine.
Yeah, and it's not fine. And so you were in Chicago, and now you're not. And so let's talk a little bit about that. And how did you make that decision to come back to Michigan?
Yeah. So near the end of March, early April, I came back to stay with my parents just to get a little bit more room and have a little bit more freedom than I had in my 600 square foot apartment. And my lease was coming up at the end of June, and I was really thinking about, my next move if I wanted to sign another lease. We had no idea if our office would be reopening at all this year at that point. And most of my coworkers who are not locked into a lease were doing either a 1-month Airbnb stay somewhere. A lot of people were leaving San Francisco. So I started to think a little bit about, saving money. I could come home. It's not ideal, but at least I have that option.
How has it been? How is it when you leave home and you're going to college and, 10 years goes by and you've been out on your own and then you come home to live in your childhood home with your mom and dad? It's interesting. It has been 10 years. I left in 2011 to go to college and have not lived at home since. So I keep telling people, I'm like, yep, 27, moving back into my parents' basement. That is the dream. That's a dream of every young millennial. It's the dream of every parent, too, to have their child come back. How has that adjustment been for you? And is it different now at your age at 27 versus being, 17 or 18, and how you view the relationship with them and how you actually kind of meld yourself back into the house?
Yeah, it was interesting, and it is interesting still. We talk to each other and call each other our roommates, jokingly, but it's pretty serious too. It's been fine. I just have to find time to like really get away or go into another room and shut the door and just have my own alone time, because I don't think I realized how much time, although I had a roommate in Chicago, I did spend by myself. And, with my dad being retired, my mom's still working, but someone is always around.
Right.
And that's just a little bit different than what I was used to.
Well, and you have to navigate a little bit in terms of that time where you are by yourself, or when you need to be together, like in a common area, like the family room where somebody's watching the news or whatever, and it's maybe something that you don't want to watch. And, how do you start to balance those things out? And, I can see that it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment for them as well, having you there.
Absolutely an adjustment. And my dad and I we joke, but we bicker. And my mom's like, you two are the worst roommates together. He'll turn something on the TV and I'm like, I don't want to watch CNN for the 15th night in a row. And he's like, this is my house.
This is what I do. Yeah.
You live in my house now. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, God.
Okay, well, CNN, you're getting a little education there, I'm sure.
Yep.
How do you see this going forward then? I mean, here you are now, you're living at home, and, any ideas with your company in terms of when they might have people back, or are they talking about it?
Yeah. They're not talking about it. We definitely until the end of 2020 will not be returning. We don't have a set date for return as of now. And of course, everyone's speculating. And now with Google's announcement this week that they won't be back until July of 2021, I think people are getting a little antsy and want some clarity around what we'll be doing. But at this point, I'm just kind of waiting it out. I'm going to stay home through probably the end of the year and then just recalibrate based off of hopefully 2021 movement.
Can you see yourself going back to Chicago, or do you think that that's behind you now and that you may, get yourself down towards Southeast Michigan? You spent some time down there, I think, too, previously, and so.
Yeah. I don't feel like I'm done with Chicago, or at least I feel like I have one more move in me. I don't know that it's going to be Chicago, but Michigan does feel like kind of a life move, and I always said, it'll be 2 more years and I'll come back to Michigan. It'll be 3 more years, whatever it is. And then once it happens and I'm here, I'm like, oh, I'm not ready for this. So I think I will go back somewhere, if not Chicago.
What do you think that your life looks like here as you kind of get to this place? And, we will never probably have a bigger disruptor in our lives than the one that we're experiencing right now in 2020. Has it changed you a little bit in terms of your kind of goals and looking forward, or how you really kind of view things now going forward?
Yes. It has changed things in terms of what's actually important, which I think is awesome, and also a little bit scary, because if we hadn't had this, I don't know how things would have shifted for me. I talk a lot with my friends about it's bizarre moving home, but also how cool is it like to look back and be like, I got to move home at 27 and spend a full other year with my parents that I probably never would have had the pandemic not happened. And it also makes you shift things a little bit. Like, why did I think that going out to a bar in Chicago every weekend was like the thing to be doing?
Yeah, it really does. It changes you in your perspective about how you spend your time. And I suspect it probably changed you too in terms of how you spent your money.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But I just don't see how that sector. So like in Chicago right now, you can still go out to dinner and go out and stuff, but if you don't have a reservation, it's impossible to get in anywhere. And also, it's a 2-hour time limit with 6 people. So it's not like you're having the same experience as you were prior to this anyways. So
is there enough to do here in Lansing? I suspect that really one of the reasons you went to Chicago to begin with is because there was so much more to do. And, we're not comparing apples to apples now because nobody can really go out. I mean, you can go to a restaurant, but it's just not the same feel. But do you feel that you're just not as fulfilled, or is your fulfillment different?
I think my fulfillment is different. There's definitely enough to do here. And I also love being outside. So coming back to Michigan, that's also another bonus. Like golfing here is so much more accessible. And honestly, just like going for a run. The Lakefront Trail just reopened in Chicago. That was closed for the last few months. So things like that, there are way larger advantages to being back in Michigan than there were being in the city.
As you kind of experience this and look back on your life, what would you tell your 18-year-old self now that what you know prior to the pandemic and then now during it? What would you say to yourself?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I was trying to think about this question, and I think the biggest thing I would tell myself is to slow down, because I was so concerned, I think prior to the pandemic, like, what's my next move? What's my next move? And how am I going to get there as quick as possible? And then something like this happens where it just halts everything. And you're like, was it really that important to get to that next thing as fast as I did?
Do you and your friends talk about this?
We do now. We didn't prior to the pandemic, but we often talk about like, why were we so worried about whatever that was. It really wasn't even a big deal.
I think that that's what people have really realized. I specifically know that, I really see what's important in my life, the people that are important in my life, how I want to spend my life. And, the things that I was kind of doing before that really, they have no meaning really to me. It's about people and relationships. It always is. Any parting thoughts for you as you look to address this going forward in your life?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about who you're doing things with and who you're surrounding yourself with, and not the what. It's the who.
I completely agree. You know what? I'm so glad we finally did this. My guest today is Molly Duda. She is not only a great friend, she's an outstanding young professional. Thanks for joining me, Ma.
Thanks for having me, KB.
You bet. I also want to thank my supporting sponsors, Marketing Resource Group, White Law, Downing Industries, Governmental Consultant Services, AF Group, AT&T, and the Loomis Law Firm. You can listen to all my podcasts at connectwithkb.com and follow me on social media. Until we connect again, go live your best life. I'm your host, Kristin Beltzer.